We had always said that we were making a little movie each week, and that was really the spirit in which the show was done.
There was always this idea that what we're doing is already big screen worthy.
I thought, you know, this is the kind of show that we can flush out, and I wanted to exploit the visual tapestry that I thought that Chris and I were capable of.
We realized at the end of 5 years it would be a great time to do a big event, something that would celebrate and reward the hardcore viewers who had been watching this show for, you know, since the beginning.
For Chris, it offers the show, I think, the ability to just expand and grow and do things that we're not able to do in the series, just being able to do things bigger and better.
I think the production values will be greater, the camera work and all of the above. You know, more time being taken makes that richer, cleaner, better look. So it's like going from a quarter pounder to a half pounder.
The advantage that we had was that Chris, and I gotta say from the very beginning, was writing scripts that I understood, and he wrote this script knowing that I was going to direct it, and he wrote it right to my strengths.
As an actor, you know, it's very easy for me to relate to Rob because I've been doing it for almost 4 years now. I mean, we have a shorthand.
Okay.
He understands the way I work, and I understand the way he works, so much better for me to come in to work for Rob on the movie set. There's a lot less anxiety about the newness of it to work with Rob.
This was not a process of me trying to meld towards somebody else's vision. This was cohesive from the beginning.
He understands the show. He understands the characters. And he's really good with the, you know, the big toys and the things that he's got to do. I mean, he's always wanted to play with the expensive stuff. And so now we get both, you know, a guy that knows the characters and knows the story and knows the show, and who's been dying to get his hands on, you know, the rich boys' toys. So he's kind of the perfect director for it.
The trick was to do a movie that wasn't just for X-Files fans, but would appeal to any kind of moviegoer. And it was a trick because you didn't want to do anything to insult the hardcore audience. Like you didn't want to have to reestablish the characters, redefine who they were. So we had to bury some character development inside the beginning of the movie, and we did it in, I think, a humorous way.
They've closed the X-Files. There's procedure to be followed now, protocol.
Maybe we should call in a bomb threat to Houston. I think it's free beer night at the Astrodome. The scope of the movie is what has been going on with aliens for the past 45, 50 years, for the past 2,000 years, for the past 30,000 years. So you'd have to say that the scope has been enlarged for the big screen.
There's a sequence in the film where primitive humans track an alien into a cave and kill it, and are in turn then infested by its blood. So to make them look like primitive men, we've sculpted rubber appliance pieces that fit over their features to give them the appropriate primitive human look. And of course, we finish it off with a wig and with eyebrows and facial hair.
Once we start producing pieces in foam out of the molds, the biggest step is to do continual fittings to make sure that we do all the alterations here in the shop rather than getting on set and finding out there are wrinkles or buckles in the suit that just don't look proper for this particular character. When this foam rubber skin is completely finished in patching and it's been painted, it's glued onto a fiberglass underskull, and my head is back inside. These will be mechanical eyes, and it'll be a mechanical jaw and lip assemblies and everything to make the face move. My face is back, probably as deep back as this, and I will be looking, hopefully, if I'm lucky, I'll be looking through slots in the nose to at least see where I'm going. For each of the different versions of the alien creatures, they each have their own different head. One is a hero head, which is fully articulated, capable of expression. The other head has been sculpted into a roaring expression, and that is to facilitate it being able to open its jaw much wider than the hero head is capable of. So one of Dan's goals is to be able to paint the two heads so identically that we are able to cut from one to the other without being aware that it's a completely different skin, a completely different head.
You're saying that this is a cover-up? Of what?
I don't know, but I have a hunch that what you're going to find here won't be easily categorized or referenced.
The movie begins with Mulder having a hunch about part of the conspiracy.
Somebody's covering their tracks.
And then stumbles into proving his hunch and finds his way very deep into the conspiracy, almost trippingly. And we fall right into the heart of a conspiracy that you don't have to know anything about the TV show to jump on board the story.
We brought the atmosphere back down to freezing in order to control the development, which is like nothing we've ever seen.
This is one of the victims of the alien infestation. This is the cave fireman, as we call him. This is a sculpture that ultimately will be transformed through our mold making processes into a clear skin, wherein you will see the embryonic alien buried in the chest of this guy, and he's still alive. His eyes will open and close. He'll breathe. His head will move. So he's going to be in agony. And what Jeff is doing right now is sculpting it so that it looks like he's withering away, as if the creature is sucking all of the proteins and nutrients out of the victim for its own use.
Well, that's one of the things I like about the character is that, yeah, he's very cerebral, but, you know, he can get out there and jump on a train and, you know, run around and get beat up and do things like that. So I'm used to doing those kind of things. And on this, there's been a lot of physical stuff. We were chased by helicopters at an altitude that was a little too low for my liking, or at least my hair's liking. What
is called upon us within the script is more heightened than you usually find in the series. There's a lot of climbing, there's a lot of running, there's a lot of lifting for David, there's a lot of falling for me.
I don't get beat up and I don't fight and I don't pull my gun, but it seems like it's been a really difficult physical shoot. There's been a lot of climbing and jumping and running and ducking and leaping, and that's all fun to do. You know, that's just like, it's like playing a game.
This is Mulder and Scully running away from the cave-in, and behind them is collapsing ice that's actually outrunning them. And they're burdened by the fact they're exhausted. Scully is barely alive herself. Mulder is hardly able to carry her any faster. And eventually the cave-in overtakes them and they fall in out of frame. We don't know what happened. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Goodbye.
It's two FBI agents coming from different biases who stumble on a government conspiracy to conceal a secret from the American public, and who, through the uncovering of it, come very close together and become very passionate about their need to find the truth.
Mulder, I can't tell you what killed this man. I'm not sure anybody else could claim to either.
This is our final Neanderthal character that's found frozen in the ship, the climax of the movie. And what has happened is that the creature, the organism inside, has been living off of this body for thousands and thousands of years. So the skin has become completely clear, and it's drawn all of the musculature and most of the form out of the body, leaving this clear husk. This big area here that has been sculpted in a distended form is going to be housing the alien creature. We're going to be doing two versions. One is being done as a hand puppet for when the creature comes to life. We'll see his face pressed up from the inside and his hands pressed up against the inside, and he'll come to life and start moving as a puppet. And then we'll cut away, and when we come back, I'll have the suit on and be reaching in from the back with my whole upper body to be able to continue that process and shred through this skin and burst out through this, as well as the containment vessel, which is frozen as a solid block of ice. I mean, this has taken a great deal of time to get to this point, because it was all a process of doing sculptures and the various mold making processes and coming up with a core, which is the area inside the mold which leaves the void that we're able to put the creature inside, as well as the different painting steps, coming up with the right skin material and all the tests to find the right degree of flexibility and transparency. We had to come up with a process of casting a rigid substructure that was also clear, and the way we ended up doing that was going to a facility nearby that had a machine that allowed us to place this whole mold in, run our clear urethane material, and tumble that mold through very many degrees, many axes of movement, so we could completely coat that mold. And that was also developmental for us to be able to use that process on this particular project.
Scully?
Yeah?
Run!
Over the last couple seasons especially, I think Mulder and Scully have grown together even more. The more time that they spend together and the more times that they save each other's lives, the more respect they have, the more care they have for each other. And and that's basically continued pretty strongly over the past couple seasons. And so that's really where we find them again, is in this very productive, very respectful, working relationship.
As difficult and as frustrating as it's been sometimes, your goddamn strict rationalism and science have saved me 1,000 times over. You've kept me honest. I think that the reason the pairing works is probably because they're two interesting characters in their own right. I think people like to see a man treating a woman as an equal, not as a sexual equal, but as an equal. And a man and woman working together with that kind of respect and with that kind of reliance on each other that isn't necessarily emotional because of sexual reliance. So I think people like to see that.
Within the film, there are some opportunities for them to get a little closer in certain ways than they have in the series. There's a couple events take place that brings them closer because of the nature of the situations that they're in the midst of. And so the audience will have an opportunity to see, a hint more of just a different flavor of their relationship.
I had you big time.
That official FBI business? I play a character called Dr. Alvin Kurzweil, who was a friend of Mulder's deceased father, who was his army buddy and was recruited at the same time into the workings that Mulder is also involved in. There were questions, of course, as to my whether or not one can trust me, believe me, whether there was validity to what I say.
So you're saying they destroyed an entire building just to hide those firemen?
And one little boy.
I think you're full of shit.
Do you?
Yeah.
I happen to write rather nasty books about terrible things that I don't believe in personally, but I know they sell books. One of the reasons I do that is because I'm a character who, having quit the project, has been harassed a little bit, to such a degree that I've lost my medical license in three states, which means that I have to find some way of making a living when I'm in transit to another place to build up another clientele. So he's a guy whose reasons for doing things are probably questionable. He's probably got involved with the stuff he got involved with as a young man by default. In trying to quit and get out, he found it harder to do that. I think basically he's never really fulfilled what it is he wanted to do when he was a young man, and now is coming forth with a bunch of information to either fill his books with or maybe save mankind. Kurzweil! You'd be shit out of luck if it wasn't for me. You saw what you saw because I led you to it. I'm putting my ass on the line for you.
Your ass? I just got chased through Texas by 2 black helicopters.
And why do you think it is you're standing here talking to me? These people don't make mistakes.
Agent Mulder, you and I both know that if it looks bad, it's bad for the FBI. Blame has to be assigned somewhere.
Assistant Director Skinner, he's the superior. He's superior to Mulder and Scully. No, he's their superior, and they supposedly answer to him. That's the way it's kind of supposed to work. It doesn't always work that way, because they tend to go off and do what they're going to do anyway, regardless of what his input is. I think that there are elements of Skinner's personality, his character, in what I'm doing in the movie here that have been developing over the past couple seasons, and I think that they'll just continue to build, to grow.
I heard about the project from my agent who called me and asked me to be in it, and I said, well, are you sure they know who I am? I mean, I'm not possibly cool enough to be on this show. Agent Mulder, since you weren't able to be on time for this hearing, I'd like you to step outside so that we can hear Agent Scully's version of the facts, so that she will not be paid the same disrespect. She's tough and precise, you know, very officious, and yet, you know, to play someone like that, there's a real fear of being one-dimensional, so you have to, I mean, I don't hate these people that I'm confronting. I hope that some humanity shows through. She has a job to do.
I don't believe the FBI currently has an investigative unit qualified to pursue the evidence in hand.
This isn't colonization. This is spontaneous repopulation.
It's a very interesting character, and the interesting thing about it is that there's some kind of mystery about him.
Trust no one, Mr. Mulder.
A young man came up to me and said, "You're an actor, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes," thinking he's going to compliment me on my playing of Shylock, which I had done. He said, "Yes, X-Files."
Kill Mulder. We take the risk of turning one man's quest into a crusade.
Then you must take away what he holds most valuable.
I would say he is really the evil person. He's the maker, troublemaker in a certain extent, and he is creating his own world. And he's a mixture of, yes, of evil. Rob just said to me he's a mixture of Stalin and Hitler. I mean, that's maybe not the correct interpretation, but he's creating an awful new world.
We'll continue to use them as they do us, if only to play for more time to continue work on our vaccine.
My lateness might just as well have been absence. A course has already been taken. There are complications.
Smoking is very interesting for the character because, actually, you know, it was interesting. I was talking to somebody today, and of all the kind of metaphors that smoking provides, he suggested another one, which is smoke screen. You know, the character is a smoke screen for the reality. And of course he is. He puts up a smoke screen between the truth and the people who are looking for the truth.
We need to try our vaccine on it. And if it's unsuccessful, burn it, like the others.
The public picks up the paper every day and reads, with all too frequently, about some kind of government misdeed, some kind of lie, some kind of hoax. Not hoax, but some perpetration of something that was not in your interest. And the government apologizes for these things when they're really big and bad, and it all goes away. There is no appeal or very little chance. And so I think that the idea of a conspiracy, which goes back to the Boston Tea Party in a sense, is ingrained in the public psyche, and we are mistrustful of government naturally. And I think after Watergate, we are mistrustful of them with much more good reason.
Sir, the impossible scenario that we never planned for? Well, we better come up with a plan.
It wasn't that difficult to come up with the concept or the palette for the score, because it was part of this the mythology story of the X-Files, and I had a certain kind of sound for that storyline, so it really wasn't difficult to come up with a new concept. It was just executing how many hundreds of minutes of music. To go from the small screen to the big screen, that was just unbelievable. I mean, this was as big as it gets.
polar ice cap falling into nothing and buildings exploding and just everything. What was kind of satisfying is Chris and Frank and everyone else involved, I don't think they knew I could do that. I think they all thought that I was just a synthesizer guy and that was it. When they saw me, you know, conducting this 85-piece orchestra, just immediately that was cool. But also for me, fleshing out the synth stuff into a big orchestra score was fantastic to hear that come back at you like, wow. Chris, he's never given me too much direction. I mean, obviously, when it was time to write the theme, Chris sent me stacks of CDs telling me, oh, I like the drums here, I like the vocals here, I like the guitar thing here, I like the strings here, whatever. But this one came out of left field. I mean, it took me by surprise how simple it was and how quickly it was born. I put my hand down on the keyboard and I had this effect on the piano that made this digital delay effect. So that accompaniment in the theme that goes da-ba-da-dum, all of a sudden I played these 4 notes, da-ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-ba-da-da-ba-da-da, and there was this echo delay. And I thought, boy, that's a pretty cool, simple little thing. And then it was time to come up with the melody. And I came up with the melody, I played it on the piano, and I knew, well, you can't use the piano because the piano's doing the other thing. Let's try whatever. And I went through my whole bag of tricks, of instruments and sounds, and stumbled upon this whistle thing. And God, my wife was outside and she comes in and she says, you know, that's really cool. I mean, that is so understated and interesting and spooky. And I called Chris up, I said, get your ass back here and check this out. He did, and he really loved it. But he's such a cool customer, you know, he's not one given to big exclamatory, you know, gestures and excitement. He said, that's really good. I like that. Okay, you know, and that's as good as it gets. I had a fun intro to Rob Bowman when we were doing the series, where he sort of came off like this gunslinger coming into Dodge, you know, and he was going to be the big cheese here, the big shot. And he came in for one of the episodes, and he said, well, you know, I think this should be kind of like Rock and Roll Cops, and I don't like strings, and I want this and that and the other thing, you know. And I said, all right. And then we got into a groove together, and I would fool around with him about his sort of macho bravura. I had worked with large orchestras before that, but I wanted them to know that I just wasn't a guy with a synthesizer, that I had a real background and I could, you know, conduct and communicate with an orchestra, and, you know, that was important for me. But what was more important is that the music be good.
One of the things about X-Files is that, you know, there was a lot of trust in the audience, in the sense that, you know, in leaving ellipses for them to fill in with their imagination, putting out production value that looks really good and hoping that it would be appreciated, and obviously it was. There was an enormous variety of techniques, and we were kind of inventing stuff as we went along. It's like, you know, show what you just barely need to, don't show too much, hide stuff in shadow, hide stuff in light, and I've always said, you know, we're very technically accomplished whores. We'll use whatever, whatever gets the job done. You know, if it's CG, it's CG, and if it's a drop of India ink and water, we'll do that too. One of the things we did is the worms kind of tracking along the surface of his skin. And it was one of those things where there's a very fine balance between you wanted to see them and they wanted to be creepy, but if you pushed it too far in one direction or the other, it lost the feeling of reality. So on his face, what we did is we actually CG'd his face. And by doing that, at that moment, then we could have perfect tracking of the worms because we had control of his face. But what happened is that when we sent the shot over to editorial, we got a phone call. It's like, what the heck is this? We're trying to do frame matching with the original photography, and I can't find the frame. It's like, well, that's because we made it up. We had another shoot where we shot, you know, ink and paint moving through water, and you get some really cool, creepy, kind of growing, swirling effects, and we just put those in his eyes. I mean, that's how that shot was done, but it's cool because it involved, you know, again, some really down-to-earth organic techniques and some CG and a good performance. You put those together, you might get something. Hunter Gratzner built that building, and they did a really nice job. It was one of those things where we didn't get the timing exactly right on take 1 or take 2, and take 3 we just bloody nailed it, and it was really cool because it was not only that things had to look like they were happening organically, but you wanted a moment where you could see the floors falling away from camera. That was a shot that, by the way, that wasn't originally designed. That's one that we sold them on because it showed, you know, the miniature at its best, and you could see the debris falling away from camera, and then the fireball rises up to camera, and that was pretty cool. And then there was one shot in which you came around Mulder and Scully and saw them standing in front of the building. And so we had to do, you know, that was motion control at the set downtown and then on the miniature and tying the two of them together. And it went together well.
Scully?
Yeah?
Run!
When we were trying to plan some good shots, there were some really funny moments. One of the things is, I'm trying to remember the bee doctor, Dr. B, whatever the heck his name was. He's like, he knew everything there was. He was the greatest living expert on bees. It's very interesting. He's like, he was not the least bit afraid of being stung. So I figured, okay, you know. So we're trying to design a shot, and I'm running along with my handheld camera, and I've got somebody running behind me, like with a bucket of bees, shoveling bees out over the top so that we have this arc of bees to see what we can. And it was like, and you know, I didn't get stung. I didn't get stung. Some people had these full-on bee suits, you know, and some people didn't. And Dan Sackheim, I think, wanted to kind of, in solidarity, says, well, I'm going to go without protection, you know? And he kind of walked in there. And sometime later, I saw him walking out with a very pissed off expression on his face and 2 huge red welts. But it was, I didn't want to laugh at his misfortune, but I couldn't help it. You'd be surprised how many bees you can have that still aren't reading the way you want them to. And so what we did is we filled the dome for certain shots with a lot of CG bees. To make the frame more interesting, we actually kind of came up with the idea of bees kind of moving in kind of swarmy direction. So we had like ropes of bees. So you saw these fine particles kind of twisting and moving in space. And that actually allowed us to, you know, give some energy to the frame. Otherwise it was just, you know, like a mass of little black dots and wasn't that interesting.
3, 2, 1, action.
It was a difficult schedule. It was a tight schedule, as they always tend to be. And Rob works quickly. He's an instinctive director. He's a very physical director, you know, and I like that, you know. It's like we're running around there, and it's like, yeah, we'll put it here. Put the camera here. You know, it's like, okay. Or if we can't put the camera, well, what about here? You know, and so there's a certain amount of back and forth. I think it's entirely possible to spend too much time on anything, including effects. And I think most supervisors can tell you stories, you know, about effects that got better in a negative direction after a certain point. So there's something to be said for making a clear decision, having a clear path, and pursuing it. But there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something that you got to figure out. And there was one shot that David was walking around in a blue jacket, and we put that with a green screen. And then there was a bunch of green things hanging, so we put a blue screen behind that. And then in order to have tracking, we had all kinds of little red boxes and panels and stuff like that. So we pulled keys on all 3 colors. As far as I know, I mean, it's certainly the only shot I've done, which was basically a blue, green, red screen. You know, what's funny, because it was a long time ago, but I remember that there was some concept for how the spaceship was going to appear, and it was going to be difficult to execute. And so Dan came up to me and said, okay, we got this whole new thing here where it's on the glacier, and the glacier kind of implodes, and the hole grows and grows and grows, and then the spaceship comes out of it. Cool, huh? And I went, okay, like, this was supposed to make it easier? Because, just for the record, it didn't. First of all, it was 10 years ago, and the mix between CG and practical, as you know, continues to evolve. But we did a lot of practical miniature stuff, and it was actually kind of fun to do. And that was combined with, you know, digital compositing and some CG, you know, for the wide shots. It had to be an X-Files spaceship, you know. It had to be simple, it had to be cool, and one of the things that we wanted to do to make it look big is give it a feeling of a texture. You know, one of the things that makes miniatures look like miniatures is because, you know, they're real smooth. That's also true of CG, you know. It's like the subtleties of a surface, you know, and the variation of, you know, of light on that surface, even if it's below the threshold of what you can see, are one of the things that makes something look real. So we put a lot of trouble into making the surface have a lot of complexity to it. And what we used as a pattern was like aerial photographs of like Tunisian hill villages or something like that, where everybody had these little houses that were square, but so there was a repeating pattern, but it was randomized and it looked really cool. And that plus river valleys and stuff like that. So we made this huge piece of artwork and then etched brass with that pattern, and then just stuck that on the spaceship. And also part of the trick was lighting it with that hard, you know, raking light that just kind of picked up the highlights. So you had the highlights and the shadows and shifting as it moved in it. It gave the spaceship a little bit of scale. It's part of the X-Files ethos, you know? I mean, it really is a cliche, but it's grounded in truth. That in any movie that you go to, it's a collaboration between, you know, between what's up on the screen and who's sitting in the audience. And so, you know, give people with imagination something to work with, and you're going to get a great experience.